Hello friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. Well, I know about 4 weeks ago or so, if you watched my this and that video where I talked about weights, I wanted to do a separate video that's a standalone so I can have something to link people back the next time I get the question on why I don't use weights in fermenting. Years ago, about 25 years ago or so, I started making, my first real ferment was making homemade kimchi, and I did a lot of research to learn about it first and had the traditional way of doing it, and I just went for it. After I kind of compared a bunch of different recipes and ideas, I went for it, putting in my own tweaks. And I do have some kimchi recipe videos out there. And then through the years, I eventually came up with my own method of fermenting, which involves using a starter just to ensure I get a good ferment, but also meaning I don't have to use so much salt. And it's a starter I make myself from scratch from whatever I have on hand. It's super easy to do. And I have a video on that I'll link to in the description box down below. I'll also link to my last video, fermenting related video I did that was on the red onions, which was where a lot of these comments were coming in, and the one on how to make your own vinegar. So in the research that I did at the time, I never even heard of fermenting weights or ever using them. And so I have never, ever used weights when fermenting onions, garlic, cucumbers, snow peas, whatever it is I felt like fermenting. I never used weights. The only time I heard of weights, using weights at all, was later on when I was making vinegar. And I started out with, when I first started making vinegar, I didn't put anything on top. I didn't stir it. It would just get moldy on top. I would lift it off because the vinegar would kill the mold inside the vinegar. So when it was done, I would just lift it off and throw that away. Then I would strain it out. Then I picked up on the tip, it might have been from Mary's Nest, about stirring. And I'm like, oh, I never thought about that. Stirring every day for at least the first 2 weeks. So that what that does is that stirs everything down, keeps things from flowing over. And I actually just stirred this, but this one's so active it has to be stirred quite, you can stir it a couple times a day to kind of push things down. And what that does is it helps to aerate the vinegar. It pushes all the ingredients back down under the liquid and works those bubbles out so it's not pushing everything up and out and having it run out all over the place. But that's also why I usually have something under it, like you can see here. Can you see? I don't think I have the camera down quite far enough. I'll move this over a little bit here. So I usually have these little homemade crocheted doodads that if it does overflow at all, at least that kind of catches it and keeps it contained, and it looks nice. And then this vinegar here doesn't really need to be, it's to the point I don't really need to stir it every day. But I still do because I'm stirring this one and this one's still bubbly. It's just not pushing everything up and all my stuff is staying below the liquid level. So I did try initially to use some homemade type weights, using like a grape leaf with a rock that I cleaned on top, using a plastic bag with water in it, using a jar. That was another one, taking a smaller jar. And I found those things to all be simply a waste of time. You can't just do that and then walk off and leave it, because it's either still going to bubble up and over, or you're still going to have stuff coming up and developing mold. If you don't want mold, stir it every day. Even if you do get mold, it's nothing to be afraid of. Like I said, you lift it off, you strain it out. Any mold that ends up in the vinegar, once it's vinegar, is going to get killed. So I'm not worried about that. And then as far as a lot of people had said that everything they read said you have to use weights on top of your ferments, like with the onions, kimchi, and more. And I never heard of such a thing. I'd never, even with the weights on the vinegar, that was to just, keep things, keep it from molding and keep everything from just kind of pushing up and over. But on your ferments, especially like this, especially when you got a lid on top, I thought that was just silly. So here's what I do, is when I have a ferment like this is already fermented, but red onions, because they have such a deep red color in that skin, it colors everything in there. So what I do during the fermenting period is I put that lid on tight and I simply do this, just to kind of mix everything in, make sure everything gets recovered again. And then I'll tighten that, I'll loosen that lid back up just a little bit, maybe about a quarter turn, just so that pressure doesn't build up in there, causing the lid to blow off or causing it to bubble over and make a big mess. That just helps the gases to release. But these have been done for a while. I'm just keeping them in the fridge right now. And I just need to start using them. I kind of keep forgetting they're there. But that's a great thing about ferments like this, especially when you keep them in the fridge. They can sit in there for a year or so and still stay good because they're fermented. But for me personally, I do not use weights. I know you can buy these fancy, expensive weights, and I just find them a waste of money and a waste of time. However, each person needs to do what they think is best for them. If you like the use of weights for your vinegar so you don't have to stir it every day, and you get I think maybe the glass ones might work better, the ones that are made for fermenting, then do that. However, here's another thing I like to say about that when it comes to vinegar. Vinegar needs oxygen exposure, and when you got a weight that's going all the way across there, covering the whole thing, you're still going to have some oxygen exposure, but it's going to cause it to take longer because it's not getting as much. So it's kind of defeating the purpose of having a cloth cover over your vinegar. That's what the cloth cover is for, is to keep dust, dirt, bugs, and so on out, but also to allow oxygen to get in. It's important for vinegar that you do that, or it's not going to turn to vinegar. If you're making wine or mead, you put an airlock with water in it on the top to prevent the oxygen from getting in, so it will turn to wine, and the gases come up and are released through the water and through the airlock, but it prevents oxygen from getting in to turn it to vinegar, because it takes 30 days either way. But with vinegar, with oxygen exposure, that's what makes it vinegar and not wine. And with an airlock, that's what makes it wine or mead and not vinegar. So you have to have that oxygen exposure. Well, if you have this big wide weight to hold everything down because you'd rather not stir it every day, then it's probably going to cause the process to take much longer for it to become vinegar. But again, if that's fine with you, so you can just walk off and forget it and not have to worry about stirring it every day, and those weights actually work. I don't know about those those expensive ones because I never used them. I just tried other free ways to do it, and I found it totally worthless. So maybe the weights work better if you like that. That way you can just walk off and leave it and not have to worry about stirring it every day. But it might, instead of taking 30 days, it might take 6 to 8 weeks instead, because it's not getting as much of that oxygen exposure going through there. So no, I don't use weights, and that's why, but that doesn't make me wrong, and it doesn't make it wrong to use weights if that's what you prefer to do. Like I said, with the ferments, it only takes a few days for it to ferment, whether you use a salt brine method in a warm area. If you're doing a cold ferment like kimchi's traditionally done, it can take 2 weeks. But even then, the way I used to do it, I never found weights to be necessary. So that's just going to be entirely up to you. But no, it's not required. You don't have to. Just so you know that. If you can't afford to run out and buy weights, don't bother. You don't have to. If you want the weights because you think it's going to make your life easier, or the pickling tops because you think it's going to, which I don't use either, because you think it's going to make your life easier, then do that. So you don't have to, especially if you have tons of, like sometimes I have lots and lots of vinegars going. That can be a lot going through and stirring every single jar. I get that. And we got to do whatever is going to help us streamline our life. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and don't forget to check out the links I'll be putting in the description box down below, and also to share, do you use weights? Do you not use weights? Why not? Go ahead and put those in comments down below so people can get some good ideas from you. Oh, and don't forget to also share with us the types of weights you like to use and what works best for you. And thanks for watching. Take care, and God bless.